In this episode, we will get to know statutes and more specifically public laws. And yes, you read that right. We are going to learn how to use the force for legal reasons. So just like the Star Wars franchise, we're going to start in the middle of the story, episode 4, if you will. So as with Star Wars, our hero Luke is grown up and just about ready to start his adventures. So the same is true for our hero, the public law. So in our story, the law has already been signed by the president, and in the federal realm, that is known as a public law. For how a bill became a public law for the president to sign, we would need to look at our prequel, episodes 1 through 3, where we will talk about legislative history, and that will be coming after. So let's get to know our hero, the public law. And first, we want to see how we refer to public laws. As you can see on this website of public laws at congress.gov, public laws are assigned a number. What we're looking at here are the most recent public laws signed into law by the president, and the most recent one here is Public Law 114-115. What this is telling us is that this public law was enacted, signed by the president in the 114th Congress, and it happens to be the 115th law. Congress is a 2-year period of time in which the legislature, the Congress, sits. So you can see here the different Congress numbers for each of the years. To get a better sense of this, let's look at this table where we can see Congress number 1, not surprisingly, started in 1789. And as we scroll through, we can see which years are assigned which Congress number. So you could either do the math or look at this nice table. So for instance, we would see that the 93rd Congress started in 1973 and ended in the end of 1974. And as we've just mentioned, we're currently in the 114th Congress, which started in the beginning of 2015 and will end in the end of 2016. So let's take a look at what a public law looks like. So of course we've been talking about ERISA, and here is the public law that enacted ERISA. So now we see our public law number, and we now know that that means that ERISA was originally passed, or this public law was originally passed in the 93rd Congress, 406th law, and as we already saw, the 93rd Congress covered 1974. And we see here ERISA, and we begin to see the beginning of the statute with the different sections. The other thing we see here on our public law is where this public law lives, what planet, if you will. So up here we see that Public Law 93-406 appears in volume 88 of the set Statutes at Large, abbreviated STAT, and starts on page 829. So let's take a closer look at that planet, Statutes at Large. And you can see here what the volume would look like on the shelf. And you see here volume 88. And here is the first page of volume 88, where we see our public law 93-406 would fall within this number range. Another place or planet where public laws can be found is called USCAN, and that stands for United States Code Congressional and Administrative News, and don't worry, nobody's going to ask you to repeat that, but you do want to remember USCAN because you will see that cited sometimes in cases, sometimes in law review articles. And what USCAN covers, in part, are public laws, and you can see, again, what USCAN would look like on the shelf, and you can see the first page of our Public Law 93-406, and what it looks like in USCAN, which is pretty much the same as it looks in the Statutes at Large. So as you can imagine, a piece of legislation can get amended. So what happened if ERISA was amended at some point in the last 40 plus years since 1974 when it was first passed? And as you probably guessed, it has been amended many times. You wouldn't want to have to track down each amendment in USCAN or statutes at large, and then figure out if that amendment was then subsequently amended, you'd want to look in one place where you could find all of the laws as they currently exist. And that is where the force is with us. And the force is with us in a process called codification. What happens is the laws as they currently exist are put in something called the United States Code, but they're put in a very particular subject arrangement, and that process is called codification. So let's take a look at one of the places where we can find the U.S. Code. We're actually going to take a look at Lexis. So here on Lexis, we see the section of the code we were interested in, section 1144 of Title 29. Let's take a look at the table of contents, always our friend, of the United States Code. So here on Lexis, we see the table of contents, and we see the different subjects of the United States Code. In the U.S. Code, subjects are called titles. So we see that Title 6 is domestic security, Title 8, aliens. If we scroll down a bit, Title 18, crimes and criminal procedure, and of course, the title we're interested, Title 29, covers labor. So within the labor title, we see the different chapters, and sure enough, Chapter 18 covers employment, retirement, income security, ERISA, and within Chapter 18, we can see the different subdivisions, and within the subdivision of administrative enforcement, sure enough, we see Section 1144, and we'll also see some other sections that possibly are of interest, possibly civil enforcement, possibly regulations, other sections that may be of interest as well. To get a better sense of this codification, let's take a look at a table. And this is a table available on the House of Representatives site, and we can see I've pulled up in this table our public law 93-406, and what this table tells us is exactly how the different sections from that public act get transferred over into the code. So we can see the first few sections of public law 93-406. We see the pages and statutes at large. We see that they got transferred to Title 29, and we see the sections within Title 29 that each section gets transferred. And notice that the section numbers are not the same. So if you know the section number of the Act, it won't necessarily be, and probably even won't be, the same section in the U.S. Code. If we scroll down, so we see these first few sections are in Title 29. We actually see some later on sections that actually got transferred to a different title, a different subject within the U.S. Code, Title 18. And if we scroll down looking at our U.S. Code section, we can find the section we're interested in, 1144, and we find out that that originally appeared in Section 514 of the Act of Public Law 93-406. And of course, those sections, if they still exist now, will be reflected in the U.S. Code. We can see what that looks like on other services. For instance, here is the U.S. Code on Westlaw, and Section 1144 pretty much looks the same. And on Bloomberg, we see again Section 1144 looks the same. The wonderful thing about using the U.S. Code either on Lexis or Westlaw especially, and somewhat on Bloomberg, although honestly not as much as we will discuss, is an annotated code really allows us to use the power of the force to help us with our research. And it does that through the features of the various annotations or additions to the code. So you see what that will look like on Lexis. You can see what it looks like here on Westlaw, and again, one aspect is available on Bloomberg. And we will be going into far more detail about how the annotated code really is our best friend when we talk about annotating codes in class next. So as we see, to be continued.